Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is John Hewitt, and that name may ring a bell from long ago, as it did with me in the tech service business. He is now the CEO of Loyalty Brands. He's a franchise expert with over 50 years experience helping over 5,000 people achieve their dream of business ownership. He's founded 3 companies with over 10,000 franchises. He's an author of I Compete, How My Extraordinary Strategy for Winning Can Be Yours. He's 2005 Entrepreneur of the Year, awarded by the International Franchise Association, and he is founder and chairman of the board of Liberty Tax. John, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. So, in exploring reality, which we are often kind of having a mixed experience, right? We have an inner and outer experience. Most of us are bereft of being able to talk about, let alone understand that inner experience that we all have that doesn't spill out, because it often sounds like we're crazy when we do. So what we are attempting to achieve with this podcast is to share that kind of information from others who have been on the journey and are willing to share. And so in that framework, when did you first begin to become aware of that inner experience, and what was it like?
Well, I've been, as a child, I was looking back and analyzed what's happened, that there's an author called that people are mostly familiar with, Kathie Lee Gifford. And in her book, she wrote about the age of bliss. And she said that up until you're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, everyone lives in an age of bliss. They think they can do anything. They can be President of the United States, they can be Superwoman, Superman, Batman, they can be an astronaut, they can do anything. They can be Harry Potter. But along about that time, everyone starts beating you down. And that includes your teachers, your parents, your friends, your enemies. They say, you can't do that, you can't do that. And in looking back, I realized that one of the things that is different from me, that I've always been able to overcome, is I've never got out of that age of bliss. They never beat it out of me. So I've always,
like a kid, huh?
I've always been independent and confident, and that they couldn't talk me out of my confidence. So I realized that, looking back, that started about 4th, 5th grade, that others were held back, but not me.
And congratulations for that, because that's often a rare occurrence, that you stick with it, that you stay true to your own experience and don't allow yourself to be diminished by others. How do you, with your age now and your wisdom from so many experiences, why do you think people have a tendency to do that, to diminish others?
I think it's human nature that as I've gone through my almost 75 years, I've noticed that everyone tries to make each other normal and fit in a box, and they want to be comfortable around you, and they don't want you to excel. I mean, they'll tell you they want you to be a big achiever and
Mhm.
to be very successful. But as you proceed through life, everyone tries to bring you back to the norm. You know, in Rich Dad Poor Dad, he said that 90% of people in the world, 95% of the 90% of the people around you will give you advice. And he said, but only 5% of them are successful. So why are you listening? Why are you listening? And I'm not sure why it's human nature. Um,
We want to fit in,
but
I think, right? That we want to acquiesce to what makes things comfortable and at least somewhat um, congenial.
yeah, I had one guy that I had to eventually let go. I mean, he was a great man. He, you know, I sat down with him. He got up to the number 2 position in our company at Liberty Tax. We had 500 employees, and we were a $500 million public company. And finally, I went to him and said, I said, if we had a survey and asked all the employees who was the most likable, and would you be one of the 5? He said, yes. I said, is there some chance you'd be the number 1 most likable person? And he said, yes. And I said, I don't pay you to be liked. I mean, that's not your job. Your job isn't to be liked. Your job is to be respected. And too many people, or almost everyone, certainly more than half of the people, want to be liked. When I was at one of my second daughter, I have 6 children. My second daughter, when she was young, I said, I pride myself in being weird and out there and walk the line of crazy. And she said, oh, I want to be normal. I want to be normal. And it's a disease that we want to be normal. And as
This is
you
normal
use the
anyway,
phrase fit
right?
in, exactly. What is it?
How do you determine what the heck normal is? And we're all unique individuals, 8 billion of us plus, and yet we're somehow afraid to step into our own direct experience and explore that with fervor, right? And because of that reluctance, or that we're not going to have friends, or we're going to, when you go through that yourself, what are the kind of internal processing differences, do you think, between the caliber of thoughts, feelings, and emotions that you have toward things and what those others who tend to, they'll vocally support you, but internally it's like, yeah, we really don't want them, to succeed, that kind of thing. What do you think the differences are in those two, let's just call them philosophies?
Well, I'll give you a big picture thought, and that is, one of my employees came to me one time, one of my vice presidents, and he said, I had an epiphany last night. And I said, really? What was it? And he said, you're always trying to get us to think outside the box. And you pull us outside the box, but then we pop right back in. And he said, I realized my epiphany that you don't live in the box. You're not in the box. You don't think, you don't, you're not trying to fit in. You're trying to, there's no boundaries. You have no boundaries. So I realized that that's true, that others are, they got to walk inside certain lines and certain policies, and they don't want to step over the line or step on the line. And so I realized that I'm not contained in any box, but most people are. They feel, and they, if they get outside the box, they begin to feel uncomfortable because it's a new place for them. Wow, there's a whole new world of creativity and invention and improvement. And they're, but there are people outside that live outside the box, like Elon Musk. There's no box that's ever held Elon Musk.
I don't think I've ever been inside a box either. I'm always looking at the boxes and reaching in, trying to pull people out. They're like you, right?
Right.
And it isn't that difficult to be aware that, and maybe this is something that you've found in the notion of paying attention to what shows up in front of you as your intention to perform and do and those kinds of things are going on inside of you. Is there a connection with serendipity and synchronicity that you've noticed in how things have evolved for you?
Well, the major way that I would say that that's pertained to me is that in, I brought in, as you mentioned earlier, over 5,000 franchisees in my career. And also they've opened over 10,000 locations, and I've created over 1,000 millionaires. So I'm but what I've learned is that, and I saw Denzel Washington on Facebook, a post the other day, and he said, you know what, people that are givers are the most selfish people in the world. And I said, what? And he said, because it's so gratifying and it's so rewarding. And so in terms of
Very true.
serendipity, I've learned that I can't outgive. The more I give, the more I receive, the more serendipitous my life is.
Mhm. And that's exactly what I was looking for, that serendipity, the magic moments, right? That you become aware of, that then just because you're present without the boundaries, without the fear of the unknown, anticipating something really beneficial, I guess. You're good for more, right? You'll remember that one. So, how do you find that you empower others in order to step outside their own boxes and find at least a little more freedom in their own activity and capacity to perform?
One of our principles is challenge ourselves, challenge each other. And I am almost obsessed with helping people improve. And so I'm very aggravated. And even if sometimes if you barely know me, I can get in your face and say, why are you doing that? Why are you thinking like that? And I'm constantly stepping outside the line and challenging people to think differently. And when I see them think in a very boring way, like we've always done it that way, that's the way we've always done it. I mean, that's the worst excuse ever invented, is that's the way we've ever always done it. And when I see people acting like that, and I'm so obnoxious that on times, like if you say this phrase to me, and I just met you, it could be in an interview, it could be just at a party, it could be in an airplane. If you said to me, we have a little conversation for a couple of minutes, and you said, to be honest with you, and I'll always routinely say, and I'm sure it aggravates everyone, is this the first time you're being honest with me?
Exactly. Why do we speak like that? Because it indicates that you're not. Right? And usually the preface is like talking to somebody and telling them what to do. It's often what we need to hear ourselves. And that reflection, whether it's counseling or coaching or organizational development, right? It's sometimes a challenge to be in a place to recognize your own ability to be honest, and calling them out like that. I do the same thing. Like, oh, yeah, you've been lying to me now, right? So those kinds of just little short clips, comedic oftentimes, sarcastic usually, it gets people to think. What do you find are the best of your arrows in the quiver, if you will, to get people to kind of what's the most common experience that you have with others and how they're presenting themselves and the things that you offer to them in the moment? What seems to be the most um, consistent and empowering?
Well, it's really two things. It's number one is listening. And Dale Carnegie, I love Dale Carnegie as an author. I agree with everything he says. But in his first book, I think it was How to Make Friends and whatever, right?
People.
Influence people, right?
Right.
He said he was a kid. He was somewhere between, I forget, 18, 20, 22. And he had a friend, and his friend said, I got this guy I want you to meet. You'll love him and he'll love you. And I'm having a party. And Dale was apparently an introvert. And so he reluctantly went to the party, and the host introduces him. And he was so shy that he just asked questions after question after questions. And he was for 2 hours or an hour and a half, 2 hours, he was with this guy, and he never said anything about himself. He just asked question after question after question. And he left the party with his head down and saying, that guy's gonna hate me. I mean, I'm so boring, right? And the host called him up a couple of days later and said, that guy loved you. He thought you were the most interesting person he'd ever talked to. And Dale Carnegie learned a valuable lesson: is people don't want to talk about themselves, or they want to talk about themselves. And so the first thing
It's curious,
right,
it's the one key feature of it.
It starts with listening, and then most importantly, I have again a bit of an obsession about wanting what's best for every person. And
they don't necessarily want that for themselves, do they?
Exactly. They don't know. Often they don't know, right? So what is best for me too, and I'm talking about bringing in franchisees, employees, investors. I'm always looking for what's best for every person and giving them advice on that in that journey. And again, sometimes it's best for me, and that's joyful when what's best for them is best for me too. But when it's not, God bless them, life's too short.
Right. Well, and I forget whether it was Zig or Dale or Earl or Brian or the old guys, right? That not only were they espousing exactly what you're talking about, it's that they were there was something about not only help others get what they want and you'll have what you want. There was another aspect of that brings them into more of a, how can I put it, a cohesive framework of being able to achieve simply with that curiosity and asking questions and being able to then listen, reflect, and it's more important that you do show that kind of, I think, honor and respect for others by being curious and wanting to know. And you can fit in your stories in that, in the process. However, there's this coalescence, I guess, that is achieved when you're really in that place. And there's another point that'll probably come back to me because as I was explaining, I lost it. How do you find that those original, the old guys or the old guard, if you will, that brought out these kinds of things, Napoleon Hill and the likes of him? How do you see that playing out today in the kinds of information and wisdom that they offered?
People like Napoleon Hill, who wrote his book about getting rich 100 years ago, it hasn't changed. It's his structure and philosophies work just as well today as they did 100 years ago. Peter Drucker, who's my favorite business author, he became a famous in the 50s and 60s, and his theories are equally valid today as they were 60, 70, 80 years ago. Some things don't change. And
they got new names now. That kind of philosophy today is called servant leadership.
Exactly, and that's the way that I run my businesses. That servant leadership, for those that aren't familiar with it, is the people that report to me, we set up a budget and we agree on the goal and the budget, and then after that I work for them, right? I mean, we initially we come up with the vision and the goal and the budget, but then for the for the next year, 2 years, and then I work for them.
How has that made the biggest difference in their lives?
They improve. One of my marketing vice president, she's been with me for 35 years.
Hmm.
And when she started, 2 years after she started, we were doing an annual review. And I said, well, you're supposed to automatically at the end of that say, well, what can I do to help you? Okay, I've reviewed you. Now, what can I do to do a better job of helping you? And she said, I know sometimes you know the answer and you let me flounder looking for the answer. And so you could give me the answers more quickly. And I said, but no, in getting the opportunity to make a mistake, that's the way human beings learn. And you need to learn. And by the way, I mean, so one is you're going to learn better if I let you think through it yourself. And making mistakes is how most people learn, right? They say wise people or smart people learn from their own mistakes. But not only that, sometimes the answer that I know may not be the best answer. You may come up with an answer that I hadn't thought of that improves our process.
Have you noticed that your curiosity and maybe understanding of what questions to ask has grown? And how do you notice that, or what kind of difference do you notice if you, kind of do a quick life review, if you will, and where you began and your ability to be curious and draw out those, which is true education, right? You're educating others. You're drawing out of them their own intelligence. How has that evolved from when you began to where you are now? What do you think are the core differences?
Well, I'm sure that when I was younger, when I was in my teens and leaving my teens, I was a typical cocky know-it-all that knew everything and was going to live forever, right?
Right.
And I'm sure, and over the years, I've been humbled by God repeatedly, if not hourly, certainly daily, that I have a lot to learn. And so I'm a lifetime student. And for example, I came up with something. I told you about that lesson I learned from the guy that had the epiphany.
Right.
But I learned another lesson from about 20 years ago. I was doing a review of one of my people, and I never thought about this before. But I said, Ray, you like to talk so much that while I'm talking to you, you're not listening to what I'm saying. You're trying to calculate what you're going to say. I mean, you're just not, I mean, you're paying some attention to what I'm saying,
Right. Isn't
but
that Covey's
you're
fifth
paying most
insight or
attention.
something like that?
What is it?
Covey's fifth, listen to be understood before, listen to understand before being understood. And
Exactly.
we have this bantering that goes on. We don't know how to be quiet. We don't know how to. What do you think? Is this just the gross immaturity and or insecurity that most people have, that they're afraid to just be still?
I didn't put I haven't done any deep thought as to why that is. So I couldn't opine on that
But if
because
you did, what might
I,
that be?
well, if when I think about it, it's just that what that means to me is most people don't really, they use the word listen, but they don't really listen. They don't understand the word listen, and they don't pay enough attention. They get distracted. They have their own thought. They want to say what they want to say, not hear what you want to say. And the smartest people, the most adept and improving people, are careful listeners, and most people are not.
How do you see that changing now with the upswing in the active listening, instruction and the knowledge of that, and now what used to be interpersonal skills being labeled as emotional intelligence. Do you see that making a shift in how people are able to be more present and listen better? Or do you see that it's still just not really working yet?
No, I have a lot of touch with the younger generations because I have so many hundreds of employees and franchisees, and I have
A
6 children.
multi-generational workforce
Yeah,
that you're
I
having
have,
to deal with has got to be just a real challenge, and yet also pretty rewarding when you can find those touch points.
sure. I have 6 children, 11 grandchildren, and today I'm having my fourth great grandchild. So
Oh,
I'm in touch with the very young, and they're less attentive, if anything. You know, when we were growing up, we didn't have, I mean, we barely had television, let
mhm,
alone let alone a smartphone
right.
or
Very few
Tik,
distractions.
yeah, TikTok or
What's in
Facebook
front of
or
us.
all this.
Yeah.
So my children are just like, and the people around me are immersed on their phones and doing all kinds of things, and not they're thinking less about important things and more about distracting trivial things like taking a picture and posting it on Facebook or TikTok, or I mean that's silly stuff. Whereas this is a very serious world, and very serious stuff is happening, and our country is suffering. I see the quality of service in our country has decreased every year as long as I can remember, because people are less and less attuned and caring about doing the right thing and exceeding people's expectations.
How do you think that might change, or what do one of the things that I noticed coming out of COVID is that we had this massive separation, right? The behavior modification with the obsession on self-hygiene, sequestration. And at the beginning of that, I turned to my wife, who is originally from St. Petersburg, Russia, and she left there just prior to, she grew up in the USSR as a piano pedagogue and had a really wonderful education. But I turned to her and I said, I really hope that this obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration will get people to self-examine, turn inward, and find out who they are and how they want to live, and then do something about that. And some did, it seemed like. There were a number of virtual groups that began to pop up of people seeking each other out. And yet, when we all began to come back together, they were seemingly looking for that normal that they'd been experiencing prior to. And now there's this notion of, okay, we've got to create a new normal. How do you see that happening from your perspective? Because you're from where you are in the world that you deal with in the industry that you are, you get a pretty good reflection of how business is flowing. And so how does it appear to be working towards something new where there's more attention, intention, and interaction toward serving each other and being part of a community and a larger perspective from that internal place? Or is it still survival of the fittest?
Yeah, I think it just gets worse and worse. I haven't seen any thoughtful uh, trend in being better people, doing the right thing, being more
You don't
thought.
get it, we don't get it from
Even
our
things,
leadership, do we? It comes from the leadership.
even things like reading books. I asked my 18-year-old, my youngest, the other day. I said, "How many books have you read in your whole life?" It's the first time I ever asked, almost the first time I ever asked, first time I can remember asking anyone that question. In your whole life, how many books have you read? And she said 50. Now, when I was a kid, because of no internet and because I loved to read, I was reading 100 books, at least 100 books a year. And I read, before I got out of high school, I read the Bible, War and Peace, 2,000 pages. Gone with the Wind, 2,000 pages. Dune, my favorite science fiction, 1,000 pages. I mean, I read everything I could get my hands on, and no one reads anymore. No one reads books anymore. I mean,
We have 240 characters.
exactly. We're not getting the basics of human nature. We're not learning it. And Zen, in school, you don't learn the four most important things in life anymore, right? The number one most important thing is relationship with God, in my opinion. Secondly is a significant other. You mentioned your wife. Thirdly is raising children. And fourthly is how to handle your money and become independently wealthy or independent, like Napoleon Hill teaches. So the four most important things you're not learning. You don't even learn cursive anymore. I mean, they're just teaching our children less and less important things.
I taught high school for a number of years as part of my, because I've got 4 kids divorced in '88. And so during their teenage and high school years, I got my teaching cert and taught so that I could at least be in touch with their generation because they were 2,000 miles away. I've got 7 great grandkids now, just to give you perspective. What I found was, like you're saying, there's a lot of things missing. I taught in 2 different intercity schools, a couple different charter schools, had full charge of the curriculum, built multiple intelligence learning centers, and then taught at a residential treatment center. And instead of just going, okay, I'm done with that, I actually turned around and put together a business plan for a model school / village that was based on holistic education. And what I mean by that is mind, body, spirit, planet, cosmos. Those 5 areas, we got 5 fingers, right? So those 5 areas make sense as to how we can educate ourselves as well as our children to be better connected, because we need to be, like you mentioned, the very first thing is that our relationship with God, right? That's connected to everything. So when we come from that perspective, how do you find that it led you into those places? And what were the kinds of things that went on inside of you that helped lead you to those places of not just personal fulfillment, the relationship that you had with others as a result?
Yeah, it started with my parents. That I just, one of my employees 35 years ago, her father died suddenly, and he was in his 50s and unexpectedly. And I said, "Do you have any regrets?" And she said, "Yeah, there are some things I wish I had told him that I hadn't told him." And so I sat down and I penned off a letter to each of my parents. I said, "I know you're proud of me, and I know that, but I want you to understand that all of who I am came from you." And each one had given me different things, of course.
Mhm.
And it's a typical men are from Mars and women are from Venus kind of thing, right? And so the great news is they lived a lot longer. So 20 years later, I sent them another letter. But all of that started and ended with, I mean, every interaction your whole life is change. It can change you, right? And I had little changes along the way and little lessons
Well, it's
daily.
subtle, incremental,
Right.
that gives us the growth.
Right. But it started with the basics came from my parents
Mhm.
on being committed to help others and listening and respecting and honesty and integrity and the that's where it started. And then I was fortunate enough to take that and improve and do better than they had done. And
Right.
so
And as you're writing, were you, and it's wonderful that you did that. From my perspective, I had a dual benefit. I was adopted young
well,
and met my birth parents. I met my birth father kind of anonymously, had no idea it was him until after 20, 30 years later, I met my birth mother and found out what my father's name was and remembered this gentleman that I met that I really liked. And, it was 2,000 miles away. I grew up in Indiana. I met him in Phoenix. It was like 1989 or something like that. Felt a kinship, had a wonderful time with him, and then later on found out it was actually him. And my adoptive parents, I had some, um, only I didn't have any nurturing from them. I had the nature side of things with the genes. The nurture side from my adoptive parents, dad was a 32nd degree Mason, mom was a school teacher. So I had that value-based instruction as a kid that I grew up with that I still carry today. And I don't know of any other way to be, truly, because that provides that internal fulfillment of whatever happens in the world, I'm still happy with me because I did my best and I knew it from that perspective. Now, the question that you asked about how many books have you read? How about how many books have you written? Right? We've all got a story to tell somehow. And some of us get obsessed. I'm one of those. I just published my 34th book recently. And that may seem a little insane. And I love to write. That was instilled by my adoptive mother as a teacher and writer herself. So in those kinds of relationships, what did your parents give you that you found to be most valuable?
Again, the most valuable is integrity. That and I learned a valuable lesson in integrity when I saw my first company, and the next CEO, he was an incredible salesman. But I learned that how he was a great salesman is that he would talk about this future that he wasn't committed to. Turns out the future sounded incredible, that this was going to happen and we're going to do this and this, but he never meant a word of it. And he didn't have any commitment to what he was saying. And I learned that, and someone said this, and I'm not sure who to give this quote to, but the secret of success in life is just simply doing what you say you're going to do. And that's the definition of integrity. And I hear this silly definition like integrity is what you do when no one's around or no one's watching. But to me, integrity is if I tell you that I'm going to do something, if I tell you I'm going to 10 days from now, I'm going to give you $100, or if I'm going to meet you at 10 o'clock or whatever, then I'm obsessively committed to that. And then I'm
Probably show up early.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm traditionally 15 minutes early.
Yeah. Well, that's where the magic happens in anything. You show up early, and there are so many precursor or precursive events, if you will, to the actual goings on that it gives that opportunity to just kind of settle in, look around, see who you connect with, and take that a little bit deeper before things even get started.
Absolutely. And I think it's so disrespectful to be late to anything. And so someone also said, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, don't even show up.
Right. Oh yeah. One of my other hats, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of opportunities. I haven't stayed in one field like you have, but I've just had a lot of experiences, and one of that, for a decade, I helped run two events here in the Phoenix area, the Tempe Arts Festivals and the Proceed Block Party. 250,000 people in 3 days and 250,000 people in one night. I was one of 5 people that organized all the logistics and put these events on. That kind of showing up early to make sure everything's done, the fastidiousness of the details that have to be in place in order, and the little ones, the subtle effects, the things that you're mentioning that imbue the experience with much more joy and happiness for the patrons. And how do you find those little things in your work that have made the biggest differences?
The and it's the little things that people remember.
Mhm.
So you're right. It's critical attention. It's that you might go out of your way to give them a ride home, or just something simple like with, I've had thousands of employees. So just something simple as you remember that their their spouse had an operation, or their parents went into the are sick, or and you ask them about it, and just that people, they don't care. They don't care what you think until they know that you care.
Right.
And so it's showing each person that I recognize you as a human being, and I'm not above you. I mean, I've been CEO of two public companies that were valued at $1.5 billion combined. And the total investment wasn't 15 million, and the companies became worth $1.5 billion. And so I've had immense success.
That's a
But
great ROI for sure.
if I see the janitor or the receptionist or the board of director in the hallway, I treat them all the same.
Mhm.
And so that humanness is, and so I see so many executives. It's like they have a class society, people that are equal to them, or like I had an executive I won't say what, because I don't want to put anyone on the
You know, I
spot,
take
but
things right.
they were
Yeah.
executive, but everyone else on the executive committee or the board, they treated like respectfully. But everyone beneath, they would pass them in the hallway, not even say hello. No, I mean, it was like there were two classes of society.
Inauthentic.
Right, exactly. And uncaring.
Right. Yeah, people are people, and in the as I was talking about the events, one of the things, and excuse me, do you, um, I noticed patterns that occurred, the problematic situations that occurred every event at the same time and needed attention. And by determining that the first couple, three events, then I would show up right when it was happening. And the vendors would be like, oh, you're psychic and be so happy. And. So do you notice things like that in particular patterns that you see evolving that then you can step in and nudge in a different direction that's more beneficial to the workforce or your employees or the leadership?
I think that people like vendors, for example, even vendors or employees or franchisees, they always, I mean, just remembering their name, for example, is so impactful. I think it was
And pronouncing it correctly.
right there. I think it was Dale Carnegie said the sweetest sounds to a human being's ear is the sound of their own voice, a name. And so that is just has been so impactful.
And when you do that, John, it is such, in my experience and probably yours too, as you just mentioned it, it's, people just melt, right? When you show them that kind of honor and respect in an authentic way, and if you don't, they're gonna sense that. One of the things I learned, and it has been too long ago, although I've paid attention to it my whole life, just didn't realize there was a structure to put it in. It was an indigenous philosophy of three brains: the gut, the heart, and the head. And they feel that, the gut, you're connected to everything. Now, modern science is showing that, yeah, in your gut, you've got as many neurosensors as you do in the brain, if not more. So you connect to the vibration, which we know now there's no physical, it's all energy. And then, so you're sensing what's happening around you, whether you're aware of it or not, you're having these sensations. Then, in whether you're feeling it as anxiety or anticipation, then kind of moves up to the heart where you go, oh, am I comfortable or uncomfortable? right? The Taoist thing where is it desirable or undesirable? And then depending on your choice there or the emergence of the truth for you, then you can take it into your head and make better choices as to what to do with it rather than have an idea and want to push it through everything, whether it's good or bad for others. Now, do you find that that's also a process that you've noticed in yourself and how you become aware that the intuition that you've had plays a much greater role than once thought in business?
I don't think a lot about intuition. I'm more of a future thinker that, and I, it, if you include intuition as visionary, then I
It
will,
seems so. I mean,
I would,
that's
I
to
would
me.
say I'm a life master chess player. And so I think that's helped me in business a lot. And so I'm always thinking about if this happens, then if they move that move, I'm going to do this. If this happens,
Again,
I'll
it's
do
a
that.
patterned or
Right.
relationship with patterns and the recognition of them. That is what that sounds like. Would you,
Yeah,
that's fair to
I,
say?
exactly. But I'm not sure I would go all the way to intuition. I've seen people that have intuition that brag about it, that, I knew that was going to happen and I knew that. And so, but I don't feel, I feel visionary, but not necessarily intuitive.
Okay, I can see how that might, I would offer that the two are entwined. I mean,
They're
if you
close.
didn't have the intuition, you wouldn't have the future because it's a natural progression of what you already know and you intuit what might be as a result, and then can do your thing and create it, right? As you have. Now, how does that, uh, with that understanding and maybe a new awareness for you, perhaps, how would that affect, or how do you believe that might affect our progress toward a more cohesive global community from a business perspective? And whatever other perspectives you might perceive as well.
I don't think about global business cohesiveness. That's not, I'm very focused
Okay.
on my businesses. And part of that, of course, is the economy.
Mhm.
And but it's all the US economy, or we have a Canadian company, so Canadian economy. And part of that is the world economy. But my focus tends to be 99% on the industries that I'm in. Not on I don't think a lot about the world environment.
Well, you're more localized rather than globalized, that there's still that effect that the local has on the global. And do you see, at least in this near future, that there is an upswing in the kinds of behaviors in business that we've been discussing, the authenticity, the honesty, the integrity, the emotional intelligence and all of those kinds of things? Do you see that making an impact?
Unfortunately, I see the reverse.
Mm.
I see that we're losing touch with the consumers, and the quality in this country has been going down for decades. So I'm not an optimist.
Service complaints are
Right.
ubiquitous in practically every industry you're in, right?
Yeah, I'm not an optimist on that changing. The trend has been down for decades. So unfortunately, I'm not optimistic about that.
If you were, how might you see the opportunities in the present market to make gradual shifts that could impact the future in a positive way?
Well, in actuality, it helps me in the short run, because I'm competing with companies and individuals that aren't committed to this quality service that we are. So it's, as they're now underperforming, it makes my my career more successful because they're just not doing the things they need to do. So in a way, it's very helpful for me.
And how could you identify some of those, the helpfulness? Are there some specifics that you can share that might benefit the awareness of others and their ability to?
Well, I could give you numerous examples of objective behavior that we have that's better than our competitors. So I've been in the tax, this is my 55th tax season.
Mhm.
So let me give you a quick example of the what happened. In my business, most people from outside the business think, oh, it's a seasonal business. It's only 3.5 months. It's only from January 1st to April 15th. But actually, we do most of our business in 4 weeks. So it's a 4-week business. So I love driving by a competitor's office. They're open from 9 to 9, Monday through Friday, for the entire 15 weeks. And I love driving by in their office at 8:45 in the morning, seeing customers standing outside, especially not in Phoenix where it's warm, but in Minneapolis or Boston where it's chilly in January, and they're standing outside freezing while the preparer's sitting inside playing on the computer because they're like a bank. They don't open until 9 o'clock because that's their policy, right? So what we do is we open at 7 a.m. during those 4 busy weeks. So we expand our hours, which improves the customer experience. And they make it so simple for us, right? It's only 4 weeks. You open 2 hours a day extra, 6 days a week. It costs you 48 hours. And our offices that do that do 10% better than our offices that don't do that. So there are numerous objective benefits we get because our competition is not paying attention to the customer. And it doesn't matter if you think you're doing a good job or as a franchisee, or I think you're doing a good job. It only matters if the customer thinks you're doing a good
Right.
job.
And what happened to the old phrase, the customer is always right? That doesn't, it's like, and I'm sure you've probably had the experiences that I had recently as well, where, the company is like, they're doing you a favor by talking to you. And that just,
I experienced on an airline. I was coming home from New York City last Monday, a week ago Monday, and I had a 3 o'clock flight, and it delayed. And I had been upgraded to first class. I fly 200 planes a year. So I was upgraded to first class, and I was and had a first class seat. Well, eventually they delayed it so much they canceled the flight, and they put me on the next flight, which wasn't until 10 o'clock at night. So I wasn't going to get home until midnight, right? And I looked, and they put me in coach, and there's a first class seat available. And so I went up to the person and said, or in the Admirals Club, I went up to the person and said, "Why am I not put in first class?" And she said, "Oh, that's a rule we have," or whatever. And she had no empathy on that I was not that seems like normal, fair kind of treatment. She had no empathy that with my situation. She didn't care, wasn't her problem. And so even though that first class seat was available a few hours before,
sure.
right? It was an
But do
empty
you think
seat.
that this, unfortunate situations, and I understand that, people, the lack of empathy is ubiquitous, it seems. Do you, and you may not be able to answer this, but what do you think about those that do show that? Are they simply mirroring the kind of reality they're experiencing, so they don't, it's an unconscious thing, I'm just gonna acquiesce to the normal, which is that lack of empathy? And how might that at least be nudged to at least recognition and perhaps even a bit more engagement? And I understand this is it's a really big challenge right now to have that kind of safety and security in the environment and your and normal lives, for lack of a better, that show some consideration for one another. Do you see that as a possible shift? And do you see, because of your um, traveling and your, the wealth of experience that you're having almost on a daily basis, do you see that even potentially shifting? And what might it take to do so if you don't?
Yeah, I think it's shifting and getting worse. As I said, that and I think it comes down to this simplistic thought that in having thousands of employees in my career, I've had a few that act like owners, and most act like employees. And she was just acting like an employee. She had no empathy for my situation or doing the right thing. And people that think like employees, they love their policies. They love their policies. People that think like owners love their principles, and they try to be principled. And I've taught my people to that principle trumps policy. Whenever they come into conflict, you go back. I will never fault you from following our principles. I will fault you from not doing what's right by the customer and holding to some silly policy.
I'm assuming that this is all in your onboarding process as well.
Yeah, yeah. I learned a long time ago the difference between great companies and ordinary companies is culture
Mhm.
and attitude. Tom Watson, senior founder of IBM, said, "Give me 100 people with great attitude, or 100 great engineers. I'll take the people with great attitude because you can teach engineering, you cannot teach attitude."
Right.
And one of the biggest mistakes in my career is trying to change people's attitude. I've been 100% ineffective at changing anyone's attitude.
Is it possible, because my wife and I have been talking, we're opening a music school for her. She's got to the progression now, but their interest to do so. And we were talking about student induction, right? And that a lot of the kids, especially younger kids with parents that don't teach them etiquette and respectfulness. And we were talking about, okay, so part of the onboarding process then is going to need to be a class that each one of them will have or be part of that will teach them what your expectations are for their behavior toward you and toward others in the school environment. And hopefully that spills out into their other world too. Do you have those kinds of things, and what do you think are the key factors in the perhaps even retraining with the expectations rather than just job descriptions?
I wish I could. That's a secret sauce if you could ever do that. So I wish I could. I can't. I mean, I think it starts with, you asked what it starts with. It starts with a feeling of gratitude. And I try to explain, even my own 6 children, I try to explain this simple fact. If you're alive and healthy and living in Virginia Beach, you're one of the 1% most fortunate people on the planet. And you know what? They whine and complain and, oh, my friend gets to do this and I want more of that. And I've been unsuccessful at changing people's attitude. We are unfortunately, and I hate to be negative, but we're an ungrateful people.
That tends to be my experience as well. However, the gratitude, like you were talking about with that first inkling of your spiritual life, right? Your connection. That's gratitude. That's the core of being alive, being here, being able to breathe and play or work or do whatever it is that you do. The fact that we've had a gift of just being in these bodies and experiencing this world. How does that affect maybe the unconscious behaviors, or do we even have ways to instilling in our children that sense of gratitude, because it's not explained or expressed in our school system. It's that competitive, um, memorize and regurgitation for test scores. And there's talk of the personality and the character development programs in schools and things like that. How do you see what you do and maybe the kernels of or the nuggets of gold, not throwing those pearls before swine, that can be introduced, that could affect change on a larger scale? Because these are some of the things that are really important to have awareness, discussions, conversations, and sharing as we move forward. Would you agree?
I agree with that. But again, I don't have the solution. It's one of the biggest disappointments of my career and also my as a parent. I wish I could convince my children to be more grateful and of their circumstance.
Yeah, I feel the same. I wasn't around to instill that in them. However, I've had effect on others in the relationships that I've had since then, and especially my recent, um, with Luda's stepson. It's massive change in him, really, and not even knowing that, just showing him that I love him and I care for him, and not try to control him, but also understand his motives, needs, wants, and things of that nature, so that I can suggest things for him to possibly look at. And I think that may be, some of the things. We don't want to be prescriptive with our methodologies. We want to give our children and others the space to be curious and explore and fall on their face a few times and help them back up again to move forward. Do you, what advice toward that might you offer that you think would offer the best insight and understanding that you have for others to grow and prosper in their own lives?
I People don't listen to what you say as much as they watch what you do. So it's not, I don't try to convince them from a saying it. I try to show them by leading by example. So talk is cheap, right? And and again, 95% of people don't do what they say they're going to do. So talk is cheap. So I try to lead by example. That's the way that I do it.
And everyone around you can see it,
Hopefully,
what you're doing. Well, right, because you're not able to speak the words to everybody. However, everybody's aware of you, and they probably watch you like a hawk. And
absolutely.
um,
People love to bring you down. People love to bring you down to their level, right? So they have to complain about it.
yeah, yeah, instead of embellish. And how do you think that we could instill a culture of complementary environments, right? Where you look for the good in others and you comment on that. It's like the 1 minute manager, right? Where you comment on what they're doing great and then offer what they can improve on, and then talk to them about how to make those improvements.
Well,
Right.
I invented a system to try to do that, and we call it mission moments. And so we have pads of paper that have the 10 principles on them. And you have a place to write an employee's name, and you check a box as to which principle that they either violated or lived up to. And then you write an explanation. And then you tear off the sheet and give it to the employee. And if you go around our office, you'll see most of offices where they'll post them in on the wall, and they're proud of those. So we try, but understanding that it's going to be always a challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And how do we express to another things that are disturbing to us without feeling, without coming with the finger pointing. And then one of the things that Dad told me when I was growing up, you got three coming back at you, so you better have three solutions, or don't point your finger. Do those kinds of simple things, do you think that has an effect on others just with that simple gesticulation and realization?
I'm not been again. I've not been successful with changing people's attitudes.
Hmm.
So that I it's a if you can figure out it's better than the Coke formula. It's a secret sauce.
I'm working on it, honestly, and part of the activity that with Planetary Citizens, it's a nonprofit that we just launched end of last year. It's a 509(a)(2) rather than a 501(c)(3). So not only can we accept donations, we can actually earn income. And so these are some of the things that I want to put into place, because in the various fields that I've been in across industry, I've had success in doing things that others thought weren't achievable in being able to move the business forward. And just the simple things of dealing with people, and everybody's different. I don't know that there's any formula. However, there's a process of being present, asking questions, being aware and attentive to those subtle details that you see going on in a room, not just the big voices, because the big voices will dissipate. It's that collective appreciation and acknowledgement that has worked for me in pulling off some pretty amazing things. So I don't know if that's a potential of, a future offering for us as well. But I do think and feel that there are ways to do that because I've experienced it.
Awesome.
Now,
Congratulations.
thank you. And so what, right? And that's just for me, because it is the moment, and those things, yes, you can relish them. However, oftentimes it's that creating a psychologically safe and intellectually humble environment that people can actually participate in, where they feel they can speak what's on their mind and their hearts. Because we often don't have that. And so
It's incredibly rare. Incredibly rare.
I'm finding that out. And it's just, this is my natural, way I've been throughout my life. And when you're that way, you don't notice it until others start saying, "Oh, guys, this is a different experience," or "Wow, that's never happened to me before." And just to be able to, bring that to the table and offer it for that change of perspective, usually, that takes place, and being able to move the needle, if you will, to that greater capacity for working together with less challenges. And even the challenges help us all grow in the way that we meet them. Instead of pointing fingers and blaming, it's like, okay, here's a challenge. What can we all do given the skill set that we have? It's like De Bono's 6 hats, right? Which hat are we going to put on today in order to address this situation so that we can find solutions? And kind of like Dale Carnegie's, you throw it all the stuff up on the board and you don't discount any of it, and then you weed through it to figure out what might work. And that often, I find, resonates with people. They will feel it and they will say something, and yeah, that's it, right? Have you noticed that in the situations you've been in?
Absolutely. The brainstorming is one of the things that has really helped our organization. My job as a franchisor is to create the best system in the industry, and the people that are closest to the customer know best. And so every year at our conventions, we break into groups and we write down every idea. And no matter how stupid that someone might think it is, we write down every idea. And then afterwards, the executives and members of the franchise community sit down and decide, what are we going to change this year? What are we going to change in the future? What are we never going to change? And I'm proud to say that doing this 30 years, that most things we improve on that very year of suggestion. So that's it's hard enough to improve, but if you're not getting criticism, it's so much harder. So criticism is you need to embrace criticism.
Absolutely, and not take it personally. It's not about you personally. It's just about the process that you're involved with in doing your work. And those subtle adjustments can make, the difference in, whether it's a 1% increase or a 20% increase in the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Any parting gifts that you have in our conversation that has particularly come to your mind that you'd like to offer?
I think my general philosophy comes very simple. It's find something you love to do, work hard, persevere.
Very simple, very direct, and quite profound in the results when you stick to that.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your time and the wisdom that you've shared, and especially the place that you're coming from in doing so, with the accomplishments that you've had and looking back to share that wisdom that you've garnered. I appreciate that, and so does the audience.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, and you too, and namaste. And in Cats, thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I'll see you next time.